All right, let's dive into this explainer. You've definitely seen it everywhere, right? That classic square bottle with the crisp black and white label. It's a total staple on shelves all around the globe. But the history you might think you know about the world's top-selling whiskey actually masks a deeply fascinating and, honestly, pretty complex true story. So, here's the crazy part. This absolute behemoth of a brand, valued at a staggering $4 billion today, was actually built on a 155-year-old origin story that, well, wasn't exactly true. For over a century and a half, the official narrative surrounding this empire was built around a very specific myth of mentorship. But to understand the real foundation of this multi-billion-dollar enterprise, we have to look past the marketing and dig into the history books. To really get to the bottom of this, we gotta ask one massive question. Who actually taught the legendary founder how to distill in the first place? Because let's be real, the secret to making this globally dominant spirit didn't just appear out of thin air. It came from one specific person with an incredible set of skills. Okay, let's set the stage with the man himself, Jasper Newton Daniel, or as we all know him, Jack. His early life was, quite frankly, incredibly tough. He was the youngest of 10 kids, lost his mom when he was just 4 months old, and his dad passed away during the Civil War. Dealing with that profound loss and navigating a pretty strange relationship with his stepmother, Jack eventually ran away from home. He just started doing the heavy lifting, milking cows, fetching water, on a farm owned by a local pastor and moonshine maker named Dan Call. Now, for a solid 150 years, the official history claimed it was preacher Dan Call who taught young Jack the art of the still. But fast forward to 2016, right on the brand's 150th anniversary, and the company finally admitted a stunning truth that changed everything. It wasn't the preacher at all. Jack would see men running back and forth to the smokehouse and beg the preacher to see what was going on. Eventually, Reverend Call relented and introduced Jack to his true teacher, an enslaved African man named Nathan Nearest Green. You see, Nearest wasn't just some casual helper on the farm. He was literally the foremost distilling expert in the entire area. Reverend Call flat out told Jack that Nearest was the absolute best whiskey maker he knew. So Nearest took the young chore boy under his wing, working side by side with him, and taught Jack absolutely everything there was to know about the complex art of distilling. And here is where the magic really happened. Nearest specialized in a process called sugar maple charcoal filtering, which we now know as the Lincoln County process. It's widely believed this was a technique brought over by enslaved people from West Africa who traditionally used charcoal to filter their water and purify their foods. This meticulous filtration gave Nearest whiskey an incredibly unique smoothness. And what's amazing to remember here, the major takeaway for any whiskey enthusiast, is that this specific charcoal filtration process is the one single distinction between bourbon and Tennessee whiskey. So Jack gets older, the whiskey is flowing, but right after the Civil War, they hit a massive roadblock. Reverend Cow's deeply religious congregation started complaining. They basically gave him a strict ultimatum, frustrated that he was, quote, working for God on Sunday but making liquor on Monday. They made him choose. Walk away from making whiskey or give up his work as a minister. Well, opting for his faith, the Reverend sold the entire whiskey operation to a young entrepreneurial Jack for a grand total of $25. Seriously, $25. Even when we adjust that for inflation today, it's only about $735. Can you imagine buying the seeds of a $4 billion global empire for less than $1,000? It's just wild to think about. But with that, Jack was now the boss. Using a small inheritance from his late father's estate, Jack officially registered the business under his own name in 1866, marking a massive milestone in American business history as the very first registered distillery. But while his name was plastered on the building, he made absolutely sure he didn't do it alone. He knew exactly who the true master of the craft was. And a really extraordinary move for the deeply divided post-Civil War South, Jack hired Nearest as a completely free man and appointed him as his very first master distiller. This kicked off a beautiful, multi-generational legacy. When Jack eventually moved the distillery, Nearest retired, but his sons, Louis, Eli, and George, and later his grandsons, stepped right up to follow his path. In fact, to this very day, a member of the Green family has continuously worked at that distillery for over 150 years. It's a stunning testament to the foundation these two men built. But, of course, this golden era couldn't last forever. The early 1900s brought immense struggles for the booming business. A growing wave of temperance, supported heavily by factory owners trying to keep their workers efficient, culminated in the Anti-Saloon League targeting liquor sales in 1906. This was the beginning of what would become a devastating nationwide ban on alcohol with the arrival of Prohibition. Now, you might think Prohibition destroyed Jack, but actually, scratch that. In a bizarre and darkly comedic twist of fate, Jack didn't even live to see Prohibition. One morning, arriving early to work, Jack couldn't get his office safe open. In a fit of immense frustration, he just gave it a massive kick. This broke his big toe, which led to a nasty gangrene infection, an eventual amputation, and a slow, painful passing 5 years later in 1911. Leaving no wife or children behind, Jack's nephew, Lem Matlow, along with Lem's younger brother Jess, inherited the entire operation. They were left to steer the ship through its absolute darkest chapters. For 2 solid decades, legal sales were completely halted. They had to secretly hide their massive stockpiles in out-of-state warehouses in Birmingham, Cincinnati, and St. Louis, basically doing nothing but waiting as they barely scraped by into the Great Depression. After struggling for decades just to stay alive, the brand finally caught fire again in the 1950s. It was acquired by the Brown-Forman Corporation in 1956, and they completely shifted the strategy. Up until then, it had grown almost purely by word of mouth. But with a massive new injection of capital and some brilliant ad campaigns, it rapidly transformed from a beloved regional favorite into a true global phenomenon. Suddenly, this whiskey was the ultimate symbol of cool. It was adopted by brilliant minds and famous faces all over the world, becoming the absolute go-to for literary giants like William Faulkner and world leaders like Winston Churchill. Hollywood stars like Ava Gardner loved it, and as the decades rolled on, the brand became as synonymous with rock and roll rebellion as the electric guitar itself. But perhaps its greatest celebrity champion was none other than Frank Sinatra. He literally called it the nectar of the gods. The guy loved it so passionately that he sometimes wore a patch for a totally imaginary Jack Daniel's country club. He even requested to be buried with a bottle of it. I mean, that is a level of pop culture worship that Jack and Nearest could never have possibly imagined back in the 1800s. Today, the scale of this brand's success is absolutely staggering. It ranks as the #1 best-selling whiskey and the 5th best-selling spirit globally by value. To put that into perspective for you, it moves nearly 900,000 cases a year just in airport duty-free shops alone. It is a genuine titan of the global beverage industry. And the original distillery hasn't just survived. It has become a massive tourist destination in its own right. It draws over 250,000 fans annually to its birthplace, in Jack's hometown of Lynchburg, Tennessee. People flock from all corners of the globe to see exactly where the magic started, honoring the incredible legacy of both Jack and Nearest. But I want to leave you with one final, absolutely hilarious piece of irony regarding this monumental brand. Lynchburg remains a dry county to this very day. That's right, you still cannot legally buy a single drop of Jack Daniel's in the very town where Nearest Green first taught Jack how to make it. Imagine being a descendant of Nearest Green or Jack Daniel today, knowing you have to literally drive across county lines just to legally purchase a bottle bearing your own family's incredible legacy. So what do you think? Does that quirky local law somehow make the whole story even better, or is it just incredibly frustrating? Let me know your thoughts and keep exploring the history hidden right in front of us.